Hello everyone. Now in this session we will know about the concept related to the timestamp based protocol and the properties of the timestamp based protocol. We already know about how exact the timestamp protocol is work, that means related to the time or the token. Now the properties about the timestamping protocol, that means simply property of timestamping protocol. First, it ensured conflict serializability, right? It checks the conflict serializability. Then view serializability means we can say that commonly it checks the serializability of a schedule, right? Now timestamp protocol come with the both, means it's have the both conflict and view serializability. These are the two properties. When we mention that the particular timestamping protocol we want to run it, then that schedule should be a particular conflict and view serializable. Now third, that one is a possibility of dirty read, no restriction on commit. Recoverable schedule and cascading rollback are possible. That one is a possibility. When we dirty read, it's a no restriction on commit. If it is done with the any dirty read, then recoverable schedule and cascading rollback are possible. Recovery and the cascading process is possible with the timestamp protocol. Now the fourth one is a concept about the timestamp schedule and conflict serializable concept, right? It's a concept related to a conflict serializability and the timestamp schedule. Now the concept is inner circle shows that the timestamp schedule and the outer circle shows that the conflict schedule. Now timestamp schedule is conflict serializable. If it is a timestamping schedule, then definitely it's a conflict serializable. If we apply the timestamping or the timestamp schedule, then it is definitely a conflict serializable because of it's under the CS. Now, but all we can say that the timestamp schedule is a conflict serializable, but all conflict schedule not a timestamp schedule or the timestamping schedule. That is simply the concept between the conflict serializable and timestamp schedule. Now, what exact the cascading and not recoverable? That one is simply the cascading means what? If system run with the two transaction, that means a T1 and T2, then T1 execute read write, then again T2 execute the read. This one is a dirty read. Then it fails. Then we can say that that is a cascading of both recovery of both transaction. It recover the both transaction because of the cascading. Because of not at T2 is committed, not the T1. That's why in this stage it recover the both transaction. That's why it's a cascading. Now the T2 in this scenario, that one is read write of T1 and then T2 read and commit, and then T1 fails. Then it's not recoverable of a T2 because of T2 already commit, and that one is we can say that is a problematic situation. Right, that is simply the third point, dirty read, no restriction on commit, or the recoverable schedule and cascading rollback. This type of a scenario we want to control, then that's why we use the different type of protocols like a timestamping protocol, or maybe a locking protocol, or maybe a optimization technique, or multi-version techniques. Right, this is simply the properties of timestamping protocol. Now we will know about the one concept, that one is a Thomas Wright rule. If we know about the concept, we need to take the example of this, that is considering T1 T2 is a transaction, then we can say that timestamp of a T2 is less than timestamp of a T1, means T2 have a higher priority than the T2 because of T1 comes into the system first. That is the consideration, and you need to consider the situation, and then we can easily understand the concept. T2 is comes first, and then T2 come, That's why timestamp of the T2 is less than T1. Means we can say that when the T2 run and then T1, then it is acceptable. Like allowed timestamping ordering, that is T2 T1, but not allowed T1 to T2. Then we want to understand what exact the Thomas Wright rule. What the Thomas says that about the writing the content under the database. Now this is simple the example. Write are hence ignored in this rule, which write are hence ignored in this rule in according to the second protocol. Means in the Thomas rule, normally we know that one is simply normally we know that one is a write after write is not allowed, right? If the T1 is write and then T2 write, that is not allowed because of T1 comes under the system after the T2. But Thomas rule says that we can allow it. Why? Because of which is not allowed, ignore this outdated write operation according to the Thomas Wright rule. For example, T1 comes in the system first, that's why T1 have authority to do the execution first. But in this scenario, if the T1 write first and then T2 write after the T1, this is not allowed under the particular we can say that under the conflict serializability or rule does not enforce the conflict serializability. But this is the right rule of Thomas, that we can say that Thomas Wright rule is allowed. Why? Because of the ignorance this outdated right. Consider that if it is sequence is important, T2 write first and then T1, it is allowed as per the protocol. But the particular T1 is write first and T2 right after that, it's not allowed. But as per the Thomas rule, it is acceptable because of it is nothing to happen if T1 is right and then again T2 write the overwrite that value. That's why it's ignore this outdated. We ignore this outdated value, right? That is the simply the concept behind the Thomas rule, and we can allow this type of process under the conflict serializability process. Now we just to compare the two, basic TO protocol versus Thomas Wright rule. Means that one is we can say that basic TO protocol, that one is simply the concept timestamp protocol, ordering protocol, and the Thomas Wright rule. Under the timestamping protocol, this particular process is, suppose use has schedule in which two transactions T1 and T2. Now T2 have less time than the T1. This implies the serializability of schedule allowed T2 to T1. Consider these two protocol. Let's see what type of operation will be allowed and not allowed under them. Then a read implies read, write implies write. Now let's look at the type of a partial schedule allowed in the both basic timestamping protocol and Thomas Wright rule. Now this one is simply the comparison. It's not allowed processes. It's R1 means T1 read, T2 write. Okay, this sequence is not allowed because of T2 T1 serializability is allowed, T1 T2 is not allowed. That's why this type of a sequence of read write is not allowed. R1 read, T1 read and the T2 write is not allowed. T1 write and the T2 read is not allowed. T1 write and T2 write is not allowed. This one is important, not allowed. Now what is allowed? All operation where T2 occurs before T1 is allowed, or the read, that sequence is allowed. Now under the Thomas Wright rule, this write is allowed because of it's again overwriting the value. That's why that one is allowed. Thomas Wright rule says that it's allowed. Okay, not allowed is only a read, T1 read and T2 write. T1 write, T2 read. But which is allowed, all operation where T2 occurs before T1 is allowed. Outdated write is allowed because of its no reflection with the write by the T1 first and then T2. Because of that outdated write, we can say that it's allowed. Now the read is allowed. This is simply it's a write which is actual the not allowed under time stamping as per the sequence of a transaction as a T1 to T2, or we can say that the T2 to T1 is allowed, but it's okay with the T1 to T2 related to the write, and we can say that that is outdated write, which is not any reflection done under the database or no any issue created with this write. Means there is no need to again roll back the situation, roll back the transaction if this type of situation is occurred. Means it reduces the time of the time stamping protocol. It improves the performance if we allowed this conflict outdated write, which one is no not reflect or not any create any problem under the schedule. That's why we can allow it we can allow it for improve the performance of a particular protocol. That is simply the concept behind the Thomas Wright rule. That is simply the explanation about the properties of a time stamping protocol and the Thomas Wright rule. Thank you.